Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Happy Friday. I can't believe it's Friday. I'm recording this podcast the same day I'm posting it. So, welcome to my life of, kind of just putting other things first this week. But I'm actually really excited because I've had lots of guidance to talk about this. And I'm like, it feels so personal, but I'm trusting the process. And like it doesn't, I guess it feels personal, I guess, but it also it feels like very specific. And I'm trusting the process that this is going to be big picture. So I didn't really know what to call this because it's just like something that we do that we don't always think about. And honestly, to a certain extent, this serves us. So if you haven't noticed by the title of this episode, we're talking about making consecutive intuitive decisions, I guess, is what I'm going to say for now. And I've had my own experiences with this where I really put a lot of weight in from my experiences and past decisions on making a current decision. And, of course, there's value to this. Of course, there's learning from our experiences. There's the trial and error. Like, this is a huge part of learning and growth and expansion and evolution, of course, right? But there's been this big swing to being limiting based off of what we expect and showing up in the same frequency and what feels like different situations. I mean, what feels like similar situations, but they're actually like different opportunities for us. So we're going to dive into this and really I think the overall thing is like finding new opportunities in the decisions that you have. And how this is being highlighted for most people right now is like feeling like stuck in a decision. So feeling like they only have one option, or feeling like, why am I making this decision again? I've already been here. And it can kind of feel like I'm repeating the same story. And I've talked about this before. And honestly, I'm thinking like, has my perspective shifted on this? And it probably has a little bit because I've really widened my perspective on like feeling stuck and like why we have these times where it feels like we have to repeat this. And so this has really come up for me in foster care. Definitely like in education and business and careers, this is huge. So there's, the logical linear way of thinking that can serve us, but it also can make us think that like our next step is planned out for us. It can also have us thinking like, okay, well, my next decision means this because I already did this, right? So a lot of that is great. We also need the balance of, okay, if I want to get to somewhere that looks like it's over there, like there's value in saying there's other ways to get there, right? And there's a lot of systems that go against that belief. So no wonder we kind of have this idea sometimes where it's like, no, we have to do this first, or like this has to make sense first before we can do this. And I think you're probably coming up with your own example. I'm not going to go into details of examples. I'm just going to kind of get down to the message, because if we are always showing up in the same frequency, like we're going to attract the same experiences. And if we're not paying attention, then we're going to have the same responses. So we're not essentially getting all the growth and expansion that's available for us in our experiences, which of course there's a time and place for this. So I'm not talking about the time and place where it is in alignment to repeat a pattern, to respond in the same manner, to go into like what's familiar and what's comfortable, right? Like there's a time and place for that. So we're not talking about that, but collectively what's happening is with our decisions, it's like we're being called to choose something different. And as uncomfortable as that can feel, they're saying like we're easily saying like, oh, that's uncomfortable, so it's not in alignment. And that's not the truth. And we know that's not the truth, but because it's safe to say like, oh, that's not comfortable and I've been here before and I know this decision gets me through it, so I'm going to do it this way. And like that's not necessarily what you want, right? Like when you sit and think and write out your goals, like you know that the growth is from doing something new, something different. But our subconscious, it's like it's playing out ahead of us. And so what they're saying, of course it is, right? But what they're saying is you have the opportunity to slow down. You have the opportunity to welcome in intentions that are like, listen to the last episode, you know? And that's like, I didn't think this was like a continuation at all. But if you're not fully resonating with this, listen to the last episode for sure, like if you haven't yet. But if you reflect on your decisions, you know, are you taking the time to ask yourself, you know, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is this what I want to be doing right now? And start to reflect on, okay, how have I been making my decisions? How have I been showing up? So for me, I talked a lot about this like with my own coaches and mentors about foster care and how there's almost this pressure within me to like answer in a certain way, right? So I'm talking about taking placement, fostering kids, thinking about adopting kids, thinking about disrupting placement. So, like saying, you know, giving notice, like all the decisions in foster care, or thinking about taking respite, which is like temporary, you know, it's usually for like a couple days, maybe it's one night, maybe it's a week, whatever, like it's temporary. In the sense like you're not their foster parent, it's just respite, it's like babysitting for foster parents. So there's all these decisions and I caught myself thinking like because I made X decision that means I have to make Y decision. and and then Z is going to happen. And I think I absorbed some of that pressure for sure, right? So identifying like, is this pressure coming from somewhere else? Is this actually what I want? And so really removing yourself from the expectations of what's the next decision, because oftentimes our mind wants to prepare, right? Like keep us safe, let us know what's coming. And so thinking about that next decision can really set you up to expect what's going to happen, and which can lead to disappointment, of course, but it can set you up to thinking like there's only one way. There's only one solution to this. And you know, we talked a lot about this in the last episode, but it was so highlighted to me where I just automatically thought like, well, this has to be the decision. So people will talk about this like with education and their career of like what comes next. And we kind of forget to check in of like, well, what do we actually want, you know? So slowing down, taking that time to reflect of like, how have I been making decisions? What is my experience with decision making? How do I show up for myself? And I say for yourself because who are you making decisions for? You might be deciding things, but like you're doing it for somebody else. Like, are you making decisions for you? So I had an experience where I felt like I thought I was entering new experiences with new frequencies, which a part of me is like a part of that is true, but I still had this subconscious like belief and connection to a specific relationship of thinking like, this is how this relationship has to be. And when you have beliefs that support your decisions, it's really hard to make a decision that goes against that, right? And that's where things get really uncomfortable. And that's where things can feel a little bit, different. And that's where people stop. And so getting curious, releasing expectations and your beliefs about what might happen based off of past decisions, and really opening up to be surprised. Like, this all sounds like great, right? I'm saying this, I'm like, great, but how do like, easier said than done. And so I think about how this has played out for me, and it comes down to being really honest with yourself. Because if you're not honest with yourself, then I mean, like, you're not going to be able to express your truth. Because when you go to express, you're going to be really quiet about what your truth is if you haven't like processed it yourself. And so making decisions that you feel like, okay, because I made this decision, now this is the next step. It's almost a sense of like people pleasing, and it could be for yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to be for other people. This whole message, I feel like, heart, like my heart chakra. I think about the heart center and human design and like the willpower and commitment and worthiness. And this message with like making decisions, it's really coming up with like, your worth, and your decisions don't change your worth. So if the next decision that your mind is saying, okay, this is it, doesn't feel in alignment, it's a disservice to you to then commit to that. The heart chakra is just like, it's like, know your worthiness of being honest with yourself, of being true with what you desire. So yeah, this goes, I would say, get curious about this life. Where have I been manifesting the same energetic decisions and showing up the exact same? And they're saying that this is really where we're feeling stuck. This is where people are like, I only have one decision to make, or this is my only option. And where this comes up is because, one, you might not see what other decisions or options are available to you, but you also might just like be choosing not to because there's emotions involved, there's other expectations or beliefs about what might happen. So a way of clearing that is, taking time with yourself and clearing the energetic cords you have with other people. Because, you're going to have to discern between what is uncomfortable and what is like dissonance, like what isn't in alignment. And what they're saying is everyone's just so eager to say, oh, that's not in alignment, when we're discrediting how powerful our mind is, because our mind is like kind of sensing like, well, that's uncomfortable. They're saying like, there is this discomfort right now, and because it's a lot, like there's a lot of recognizing where we haven't been honest with ourselves. And that's a hard pill to swallow for some people. When you realize that like, oh, I have been committing to a lot of things in a way, like it doesn't mean like you're not committing to those things anymore. It's how you're showing up. So when you see, oh, I've been showing up in this way, and that's not even how I want to. And when you see the opportunity to like choose differently, when you open up and say, I'm ready for a different solution. I'm ready for a different option. I'm ready for a different decision. Like whatever, however you want to say it. When you open up to that and fully receive it, and then you realize like, oh, like that was right in front of me. You kind of get caught up in how like conditioned to just respond, right? Like respond automatically. And I'm, as a manifesting generator, I am here to respond. So my response, I've learned, is like, in order for me to respond in alignment, I have to know myself. I have to be honest with myself. Otherwise, I'm going to respond for other people. I'm going to respond to please other people because I don't know what I want. I don't know about me because I haven't gotten curious. So like if you're, especially if you're a sacral being, so if you're a generator, a manifesting generator, like you're here to respond. So if you're not responding, then get curious about that. And you're responding all the time. Don't get me wrong. But if you feel like you don't know what you're responding to, like get curious because you are, but you might not be responding in alignment. And so when you fully embrace that you are here to respond, you recognize how much you're actually attracting, and then you recognize how much power you have to decide what you want to attract. And then you get to decide how you want to respond. And it's just, it becomes this artwork, like essentially, of how you interact and co-create. So making decisions from past experiences, of course, there's the value of learning from it, but where are you automatically showing up in decisions in the same way? Because you're not getting curious, because you're not deciding that there might be a more aligned way. And sometimes we get so comfortable in what we actually don't want that it's like, I'd rather just stay comfortable, right? So this is really stepping outside of that. And it's like, at some point, you might say, I'm done. Like, as comfortable as this is, it's not for me. As much as this is familiar, it's not serving me anymore. And I mean, it's going to happen at some point if it's not meant for you, right? So, thinking about things in this life, and this can go in past lifetimes too. So, where, I would just get curious about, before you start like asking about past lifetimes and like getting into that, like get curious about your patterns, like your patterns of how you're showing up. So are you somebody who usually like avoids confrontation or like avoids things? Or do you usually run away from things when they get tough? Then maybe like, what would it look like to stay or to confront, like have a conversation about something? If you're somebody who normally is that confronting person or wants to talk things out or wants to, just like set a solid foundation, cut to the chase, maybe that's time for you to observe. Maybe it's time for you to retreat. Maybe it's time for you to like turn the other way for a little bit or forever. I don't know. So like that's the kind of energy that it is. It's like mix things up. If you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you're limited in your decisions, turn the other direction is what they're saying. They're like, it's infinite. And when we feel stuck, it's like, get curious about, okay, like this feeling of being stuck, this feeling of like feeling limited in my options, that's giving you an opportunity to slow down. That's giving you an opportunity to kind of like, you can either choose to sit there and wallow in it, right? Sometimes that's needed to slow down and open up to see other perspectives. But opening up to knowing more, opening up to seeing more, opening up to hearing more, opening up to receive more when you're feeling limited and stuck, it's going to help you. So speaking of past lifetimes, this can come up with decisions as well. This came up for me as it was like a big release, and it was a huge heart chakra healing experience, but I recognized a pattern in relationships, and it was showing up for me as a foster parent, and I just I knew there was something else there. Like I knew that the solution my mind was saying was the right one. And like, a part of me at times also felt like in my body that might be the right decision. So it was really like, I got to slow down and I got to figure this out. It wasn't even a figuring out. It was there's more to this. Like, let me slow down so I can receive what else is here. Like, it was almost like having the puzzle, but not all the pieces, right? So when you kind of feel like that, when you're like, I feel like this could be the decision, but there might be something else that I don't know. So when you surrender, that's when you open up and say, I'm ready to know what I need to know, right? And so that's basically what I did. And I had a beautiful experience, and it allowed me to see that I was holding on to expectations of what had happened in a past lifetime. And not only in this exact experience, but like it has shown up multiple times in this lifetime, like in different relationships. So it was very interesting to see or to hear. Um, and what that does for you, it's like seeing yourself show up in this situation and respond, and like you could see what that did for you. And then like taking that and looking at this lifetime, and you're like, okay, energetically, this is the same situation. So I can choose to show up in the same way. And then I kind of know how that plays out because of a past lifetime. Or I can choose to show up in this other way and release any expectations of how people are going to respond, and know that by showing up in a different way, in a different frequency, it's expanding for me. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what plays out in like the 3D. Energetically, I'm showing up to a similar situation with a new frequency. And what that does for your soul is it expands and heals. So I'm choosing to experience a similar situation from a different frequency. In that, that sounds so simple and like almost like, so what, right? But what happens in that is like you're able to become like this player, right? Like you're able to just like observe, okay, this is how I expanded and shifted by showing up differently here. What if I show up differently here? What if, like, what happened? Like, what was the result? It's all about like, okay, I have new information, right? It's like literally expansion and growth comes from showing up differently. I think about this with parenting. We're like generations and generations are healing right now because we're showing up differently in parenting. And it's not about right or wrong, right? Like it's not about like what our parents did or what their parents did was wrong. It was a part of the process to get us here where we are today, where we now have this understanding of, hey, as a parent, if I show up differently, my kid's going to respond differently. I'm going to have a different experience about parenting. And it is like, we can do that with anything. We can do that with any experience. Me, I love doing this with parenting because it's like real time. This example of me deciding to show up differently is with one of my kids, and I don't have to have a conversation about it. I just show up differently, energetically, right? I decide that this is how I'm going to approach our relationship energetically. I communicate that telepathically. It's not something I'm going to sit down on the couch and share necessarily, but the frequency in which I'm showing up and communicating with this soul is different than what my mind thought I had to do. And it's the trusting of I'm safe, not listening to my mind, right? Like it's that reminder that it is safe to show up differently. And that's how you really break free from the limitations of making consecutive decisions. It's not about what's the next step because of this that happened in the past. It is what's the next step based off of how I am, how I feel, who I am right now. And because when you only focus on who I am right now, that includes all your past experiences, right? But the who I am right now is as magical and as powerful as you believe you are. And that has to do with your perspectives of everything that happened in the past. So getting curious about how you show up, the decisions you've made, is all new information for your intuition to come through to you. Opening up for new ways of showing up. And this is like, you don't have to wait for something, right? Like when I say, I'm here to respond, like I'm not like waiting to respond. I can decide that I'm going to show up differently. And then more times than not, that's when I have more things to respond to. Okay. It's not like, oh, I got to wait for something so I can show up differently. Like, no, decide to show up differently. And you do that with intention and with an open heart. And sometimes it takes you resetting, reminding yourself of that intention every 5 minutes, like whatever it is, like whatever it is that you need to anchor yourself in this frequency that you want to show up in. You're going to do that. It's about, identifying that frequency, identifying, oh, not that this frequency is wrong or bad or whatever. And maybe it is serving you, but there's other frequencies that you can try on. It's like trying on these different frequencies to show up in and seeing like, what was that experience like? What did that do for me? How did that feel? And oftentimes when you're showing up differently, that's where growth, change, and expansion comes from. Like we don't have to wait for things to get super uncomfortable to change. We don't have to wait for us to feel stuck to see the other options. The other options are always there. They're always there. And so opening up regularly is going to help you, like, honestly, not feel stuck. If I'm feeling stuck, I usually am like at that point where I'm like, I just can't see. Like there must be a wall there, but like I don't even see the wall. So that's oftentimes where I do reach out for help. I talk with some friends so they can help me with those pieces, right? Other people's stories, other people's perspectives is an amazing way to open up. But set the intention to receive them, right? You can't open up to other perspectives if you're already deciding that that's not one that you want. So lots of, I definitely feel like this was a continuation. So if you haven't listened to the last episode, I'm going to say it again. Please do. Because this is really going to help you feel empowered with, one, changing your mind. Like, I think that's so, like, an interesting phrase. And I've sat with this a long time because as a manifesting generator, it's often said that we want to feel free and have permission to change our mind. And my thought is like, if that feels like, I don't know, they're saying, just say, if it feels like, well, I don't, if it feels like, okay, icky, I don't know how else to say that, but like changing your mind, there might be some attachment to that. So I guess get curious. For me, I'm feeling the attachment of like, oh, she changed her mind. As a kid, that wasn't always like sent to me on a high frequency, right? So empower yourself to say what you need to, like use the words that you need to when it comes to making that empowered choice. When it comes to saying, this is my decision right now, based off of everything I know, what I've experienced, what my intuition's telling me, this is my decision right now. And when you can stand there in your truth, it really doesn't matter any other decision you ever made before. It's not about changing your mind. It's about choosing what your truth is right now. And yeah, it might be different than what you chose before because we're changing and evolving, we're growing, right? So we're going to choose different things as we're growing, and also because we know that that's what expands us. Our experiences and our relations and like showing up differently, experiencing different versions of ourselves is growth, is how we relate to each other. So I don't know what that whole change your mind thing was. There was like some hesitation there. So if maybe there is some of you who really struggle with feeling like you're going back on your word or changing your mind, and I want you to think about your beliefs around that and forgive yourself, send yourself some love, because this is not about going back on something. It's not about being what you said you were or weren't, because you are beautiful just the way you are. I love that. No, you are complete. Like it doesn't matter, right? Like you might have said, I am this one day, and the next day you decide, I don't want to be that anymore. And that's okay. And so empowering yourself to say, my decisions today are based on my truth right now. You know, like my decision right now is based off of who I am right now, and having confidence in that is really going to, one, empower yourself, but it's going to empower those around you too. It's going to help that throat chakra open up. So open up to be surprised. Like allow yourself to surprise yourself. Go surprise you, because like that's when it gets fun. That's when you're like, oh, like I didn't even think about showing up in this way, or I didn't know that something that I had this thought about that might have been maybe lower vibrational could be this fun. You know, like that's where you really surprise yourself, and you can really romanticize things, and you can just feel really good about how you're showing up. So do we want to pull a card? We're gonna pull a card. Let's see. Okay. Oh, let's do this one. This is the Sacred Forest Oracle. So if you didn't know, you can watch the episodes on YouTube, but then you can see the cards. That's what I was gonna say with that. Okay. Sacred Forest Oracle. I just feel like this message had to come out because maybe some of you are feeling like you're expected to make this next decision in a certain way, and we just want to relieve you of that. So, okay, we're gonna pull a few cards and then we're gonna wrap it up. Ooh, I like this. Okay. We have strength, generosity and stillness. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, so the ancient oak spirit, which is actually the front of the box. That's fun. It's number we have card number 2, 23, and 33. I love that for us. Okay. Yeah, three threes. Perfect. We have a reflecting pool for the stillness, maple spirit for generosity, and then yeah, the ancient oak spirit. So there's so much wisdom within us, and we're discrediting ourselves. We are wanting to limit ourselves based off of past experiences when our past experiences are actually what gives us the wisdom to show up differently, to show up in a new way, or maybe we choose to show up in a similar way and we express it differently, or we're able to just make these little changes. We're able to experience different versions of ourselves based off of our memories, our emotions, our experiences, and this ability to like distort the reflection, right? So, looking at the reflecting pool, when we add things in, when we make things move in the water, it changes the reflection. And they're saying, like, this is your magic. This is where you get to redefine how things work, redefine how you see things, redefine what you believe. And this is where it does take that retreat, that kind of, reflection. You're not going to know this unless you're honest with yourself, unless you're taking that time. Be generous with yourself. They're saying that we want to give other people more opportunities than we think we deserve. Allow yourself to be generous with yourself. Give to yourself first. They're like, this is like, they already know this, but they need to hear it. And it's like, fill your cup. Fill your cup. And this isn't fill your cup and let it sit. This is, you're filling your cup because you know what it's like to feel like overflowing. Your generosity to yourself expands to others. And there's this strength that comes. That was actually the first card. That's so interesting because it was the first card and it's the front of the deck. The strength comes from being vulnerable. Vulnerable. And being honest. A lot of times we aren't honest with ourselves because maybe we know that somebody else doesn't agree, or maybe it feels uncomfortable to admit, whatever. There's strength in being honest with yourself and knowing that that doesn't have to stay your truth. The truth that wants to be expressed is allowed to change too. And trusting that and surrendering to that is where your strength and your foundation is coming from. So the foundation is really surrendering to your limitlessness. And that's how you're going to stay connected. It's like, I love this because it's like there's like this deep rooted energy from the trees, right? There's like this maple spirit and ancient oak. It's like it feels so grounded, but it also feels so fluid. It's like the more grounded you are in who you are and your truth, the more fluid you can be in expression, in your decisions, in the way you're showing up, because you know what you're always like rooted in. And so now you're here experiencing things based off of how you're showing up. And you have the confidence in that it's not going to deter you from who you are, because as you're making decisions, as you're moving about, you're not limiting yourself. So, I love that for us. Okay. And I don't know, I just felt like pulling one more card, and of course it's card 22, and it is joy. Joy, hummingbird spirit. hummingbirds have been coming up. Like 4 people have told me that the hummingbird is like their sign right now. And wow, so many angel numbers right now coming through for us. So yeah, we have 2, 22, 23, and 33. If you are into angel numbers, there you go. And joy, like this is where the joy comes from. A lot of people are holding back from identifying their truth. Like you know your truth. It's within you. But like write it down, speak it out, like claim it, play with it, and find the joy in being like authentically yourself. They're like, it's a little bit uncomfortable. Of course it's uncomfortable, right? But the joy that comes from finding that strength within, from finding that power and your limitlessness, it's all within you. Like you get to go around like this hummingbird of just like, here I am showing up as this version and this version, and look what I learned. And like there's this confidence and this empowerment that is exuding out of you when you just like surrender to who you are. So, okay, I feel complete. So, if you have enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend, a loved one. If you feel like sharing on social media, don't forget to tag me at the Intuition Playground on Instagram. And also, don't forget, you can tune in to the episodes on YouTube as well, so you can see the beautiful cards we pulled today. And without further ado, I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day and weekend, and I will talk to you all next time on the Intuition Playground.